Hello and welcome back to another episode of On the Cube, a leadership podcast, where we look at events that are happening across the world in current news and we interpret them to see what we can learn for lessons as leaders. Now, we don't get too much into the topics. Well, we do a little bit, have a bit of a conversation about it, but mainly we look at it from what can we interpret from this for how we can learn to be a better leader, either from a good example or maybe the person is presenting a bad example. And today our theme is looking at conflicting leaders. That's right. What do leaders do when they're in conflict? Because you know what? There are times as leaders that we are going to have to face off with someone that we disagree with or that might be doing something wrong. Or how do we actually challenge or stand our ground, defend ourselves, or even fight for what we know is right? But how do we do it in a right way that actually still represents what good leadership is, but also represents what Christ is as well? So how do we do that? Well, a number of different ways which we can do that we're going to discuss today. We're going to be talking about F1. We're going to be talking about the Daily Wire. We're going to be talking about Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens. We're going to be talking about a senator. But we're going to be talking about a fist fight in the Senate. Yes, that's one of the things. Also, we're going to be talking about what do you do when churches sue each other? We get some interesting topics we're going to talk about today. But I keep saying we, but it's just me standing here because it's not just me here. It is also I am also joined by Dr. Rod St. Hill, business pastor. Dr. Rod, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thank you, Craig, and it's great to be with you, as it always is.
Awesome. And look, Dr. Rod brings so much wisdom and experience to these conversations that I absolutely love. Well, let's get straight into the first one. I did mention Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens. Now, if you don't know who Ben Shapiro is, he is a political commentator. I was going to say journalist. He's a bit of a journalist, political commentator. He talks about he's a conservative political commentator. And he is, for context in this, Ben is a Jew. He is Jewish by heritage, but also by faith as well. And very strong on his belief and defense for his Jewish heritage. And obviously with all of this Hamas stuff and Israel stuff that's going on right now, Ben is obviously in big defense of Israel and obviously feeling the pinch from his fellow country people or from his nation, if we were to say the least. Now, one of his other she's not a co-host, she is another host that's on another YouTube channel, but on the same within the same media network, I think you would say, the Daily Wire. Ben Shapiro is the co-founder of Daily Wire. And there was this report the other day that I saw on Valuetainment. So Patrick McDavid on the PBD podcast was sharing about Ben had a public dig at Candace Owens. Candace Owens is a strong Christian. Let me pause it here. Ben publicly, had a dig at her. Actually, I said that to someone today and they're like, what? I realize that not everyone's Australian, but that's a very Australian colloquialism. Having a dig means have a go at or, pick on someone for it or whatever. So Ben, had publicly, kind of berated Candace Owens by her attitude towards the Israel-Hamas situation. In response to that, Candace Owens made this post, which is actually from Matthew 5. It's the Beatitudes. And she's put this post on X. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say a manner of evil against you falsely for my name's sake. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. She didn't tag anyone. She didn't target anyone. But Ben then responded to this as if it was. Now, it may have been, they obviously knew what was going on in the background. And remember, he is her boss, per se. He then responded by, pretty much saying, well, you're happy to take our money, so if you want to choose that over yours, then over your values, then you can quit, right? So, Dr. Rod, public feud. We've spoken about publicly promoting things and your disputes and everything like that. We've spoken about that a lot. Now, previously, it was in the context of kind of covering up. But I think we can talk about our point a little bit more without getting attacked here. Not so much, but rather than getting all the negative comments from the internet about the actual incident, because now we can actually talk about the real thing that we would talk about is like there is quite obviously, because as you said, there's also an interview that Candace did on Tucker Carlson, and you were just talking about that as well, where she kind of shares a little bit that it's been a little bit tense and everything like that. So there is a little bit of context that we do need to know about that. But when two, let's say, like colleagues, even per se, are in disagreement about something, should they be doing it publicly?
No, I don't think there's too much more to say. No, I don't think it really helps. I don't think it helps anybody. So the short answer is no. There are much better ways of dealing with interpersonal conflict, even when it is over big ideas.
Now, some people have said in the past, when we've commented on this, is but you're public figures, so you've got no private life, so you should be posting. Your things should be public. But that, just because you have a disagreement with someone doesn't necessarily mean that you should publicize that, right?
No, look, I've said before that public figures are not public property.
Yeah.
And I would stand by that. So I just don't think it's edifying to anybody to see a spat like this played out in a public arena.
So to bring it back more on, because these are two celebrities, let's say, like two personalities and very famous people, but let's bring it back to the everyday business leader out there that's leading a business. Should threatening someone, it's not really a threat to threaten someone to quit, but like, should we as leaders be challenging someone? Well, go on, quit then.
Oh, look, we can do that in the heat of, an emotional moment. But again, I don't think to do that in a public space is really a good sign of leadership. I think good leaders would save that for a private conversation. But look, having said that, Ben Shapiro is clearly under a huge amount of stress.
Mm-hmm.
He keenly feels the war that's going on between Israel and Hamas at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget that he himself has to have 24-hour security.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever he is, at home, at work, he's got security because his life has been threatened on numerous occasions, both him and Matt Walsh, another one at Daily Wire. They've got 24-hour security. So they're living in a situation of much higher stress than you or I.
Yep.
You just showed me your injured finger. Well, that pales into comparison with the kinds of pressures that these guys are under.
Yep.
And undoubtedly Candace Owens is under a lot of pressure as well. Look, all conservative public figures are in the United States and in most other countries as well,
Mm-hmm.
because there's such intense animosity towards anybody who holds conservative values and speaks conservatively in the public square, be that the digital public square or the physical public square. So we've got well-known figures both undoubtedly under all kinds of stresses. Candace Owens was in her 40th week of pregnancy when she did her interview with Tucker Carlson, so that's obviously much on her mind as well. So I think both of them were operating from fairly emotionally charged situations. But the wise leader, I think, would save this spat for the private space. And I don't think we need to be voyeurs looking in on their disagreement.
Yeah. So, I mean, to share a little bit of personal story, you mentioned my finger, and I may as well mention it because this is this pink elephant in the room. My finger waving around here with a bandage on it. It kind of goes with what we're talking about. Is like when we're in high tension, we don't make the best decisions. You know, on Friday night there was this massive storm here in the Dominican Republic. Like, people were killed. You know, we had tunnels that were collapsing and tunnels flooding, and my house was actually in the moment was leaking from almost, well, literally every room was leaking, and floor was full of water. And my son was with me, and he was over, you know, kind of intense because of the storm. And you know, there was a lot going on that I was dealing with. There was so much going on, and I was trying to cook dinner. And in that moment of, let's call it overwhelm, I made a poor decision, and I cut off my, you know, half of my nail on my index finger. So we as leaders, we operate in high intensity moments. Any leader, like, yes, there's some that operate more and everything like that, but that's what a leader is. We operate in high tense moments, in intense moments. That's kind of what sets us apart. But in those moments is actually crucial to make the right decisions, because you'll end up with losing a finger, or there'll be a public spat like this where, you know, Ben Shapiro is majorly under pressure because all the Israel stuff. He's probably feeling it internally, but also you mentioned his, you know, his life and his family's life is under constant threat at the moment as well. Candace Owens is going through all of the challenges of pregnancy and the last moments, you know, preparing everything for hospital and hormones and I don't want that to be clipped of like that just being, oh, she's hormonal. No. Like that it's just reality of the situation. There's so much that goes on around a birth of a child. But we still need to operate as leaders. What advice do you have to people that are in a moment of overwhelm? Because I would say that one word that I actually used in the moment just before I cut my finger, I said, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. Like, I said that to a friend of mine. So I just sent a message, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. But I still did this. So what do we do in those moments of overwhelm? Because we as leaders, our organizations still rely on us. We can't just fall in a heap in the corner and just go, I can't do this or whatever. What can we do to prevent emotional responses, but still be a leader without, you know, just shutting off completely?
Look, it's easy to say, but I do believe that you need practice in understanding that it's your choice how you react to a situation or to a person, but also recognizing we don't do that perfectly. Yeah. We have moments when we lose it, and that's one reason why it's a good idea to lose it privately and not publicly. But I think the key really as a leader is to practice the art of not allowing someone else or a situation or environment make you mad. Realize that you actually control how you react to any and every situation.
Now that's good, but I want to add, not but. Additionally, that's the right word. Additionally, I want to add to that, because there's some really practical things we can do also to do that. The one thing that I know is that when I'm overwhelmed and I'm being bombarded by things and I need to make a decision, obviously I've got people like yourself. I've got my you know, Erin, who's been on here, who's a psychologist, that, you know, I've got my board of advisors that advise me on things, pray over things and everything like that. So if I am needing to make a tough decision, I never make that decision on my own. I've always got yourself, Dr. Rod, or Aaron, or the rest of the team. So that's one thing that I would suggest is make sure you've got people around you that you can help shoulder the burden. The biggest issue with leaders is we tend to take on too much of the pressure for ourselves, where we aren't responsible for everything ourselves. We shouldn't do everything by ourselves because we get burdened by it. And so my recommendation to leaders is make sure you have other people around you that can help you shoulder at least the emotional burden. Don't carry it yourself. Yes, you still have to run your business. I have to run my business. But when I'm in a tough situation, when I'm feeling overwhelmed or I don't know how to respond to something, I have my advisors that I then send a text to and say, hey, this is the challenge. What do you suggest? Or here's the email that I received. Here's the response that I'm thinking. I'll send it through to them first and get their perusal. And usually they come back with something completely different because they're not caught up in the emotions of it. But we as leaders aren't responsible to carry everything ourselves, but we do find ourselves in a moment at overwhelm or an intensity that might be beyond what we can handle, and we respond to conflict poorly. And so how we respond to conflict better is to make sure that we're not making those decisions from an emotional place, either have preset answers and responses to certain things, or have a team or have at least someone that you can shoulder the emotional burden with and share that with them, get their opinion that's not emotionally tied up in the situation, and they can help you make the best decisions in those moments so that you can handle the conflict like a boss. And I don't mean like a boss, like a boss, #boss. All right. Let's get on to the next story of handling conflict. Now, I found this quite interesting. Now, I'm not gonna show the video. I'll just talk about the situation. So, there was a Republican senator called Mark Wayne Mullen, and he challenged Teamsters President Shawn O'Brien to a fight during a Senate committee hearing, right? Challenge him to a fist fight. Now, what had happened is President Shawn O'Brien had, not president of the country, just president of Teamsters. So let's call him Shawn O'Brien then. He had made a tweet or something having a dig. There I go, using that word again. Having a go or challenging Senator Mark Wayne Mullen to it was just, as people would say, boys being boys. But in the Senate hearing, that was just on a tweet. But in the Senate hearing, Senator Mullins stood up, he read out the tweet and he stood up and said, now is a time, now is a place, let's get it on. Now, unfortunately, Bernie Sanders calmed down the situation and we didn't actually see a fist fight, but it was close too. And we'll talk about Bernie Sanders and his interaction before. But Dr. Rod, my question to you is, why is it that we, not so quickly, but why is the default that we resort to violence or threats of violence? Or like if we're discussing something with someone and we don't like their response or whatever, now, this is from years of working as a bouncer in nightclubs, right? That as no one can actually communicate about anything. No one talks. Everyone just wants to get into a fight, right? Like the first little thing. Why is it that we resort to violence so much?
I don't know. My PhD's in economics, not human behaviour. I don't know. I don't know why we think that that's an appropriate thing to do. I've got no idea why anybody would ever think that's an appropriate thing to do in the middle of a Senate hearing. I really don't. And I've got no idea why people think it's smart to make those kinds of remarks in the digital public space. It just beggars belief as far as I'm concerned. Look, my training as an economist leads me to believe that people do respond to incentives, and having a camera on you does provide an incentive.
Yes.
And you might see that there is some value in people seeing what you're doing. in the midst of a Senate committee hearing. But my real concern from what I saw and from those interactions on X, what kind of example does that set for others to follow? And leadership is about two things. It's about influencing followers, and it's about empowering the people around you to be all that they can be.
Yeah.
And I just don't see that this helps in either area. I think it's an absolute disgrace, quite frankly. Both on the boss of the Teamsters union for the remarks that he made on X, and for Mark Wayne Mullen for the way in which he behaved in the Senate committee hearing. And I know that a lot of people really would have liked to have seen them fight. And there's a lot of people who think the boys just have to fight and get it out of their system.
Yeah,
but I actually don't think that's true at all.
Let's talk about that for a moment, because now, if you want to see any of the articles that we're talking about or any of the videos, we link them all below. Link to this article, but also I've linked you to put a link to the actual video where Timcast, Tim Poole and the team from Timcast IRL discuss this situation. You can see the video of the senators challenging each other. Yet you mentioned something about channeling the aggression. That was something that was mentioned, like by their podcast, of like, oh, you know what, like we do need a positive, a positive. Well, I forget what exactly, but people need to be able to channel their aggression somewhere, and if they're not channeling it, then it just explodes. Now, I know that from personal experience. Sometimes you just bottle things up. You don't respond. You keep it all bottled up. But then one little thing happens, someone drops a glass, or it's like something very trivial, and you explode and you go off about it. That's obviously not healthy either. But is channeling aggression a good idea?
Look, I think in that context, no, it's not a good idea. Not at all. I mean, these are supposed to be responsible people. In the one case, the leader of the Teamsters union is supposed to be setting an example for his followers.
Yeah.
And somebody who sits in the Senate is supposed to be setting an example for the whole nation.
Yeah.
And having a fight on the floor of the Senate doesn't set a good example either for the nation or, dare I say it, for members of the Teamsters union.
Yeah. So I'll go back to my first comment of like what I believe this situation is. People do resort to violence because I feel like they resort to violence because they can't communicate. Now, or they have trouble articulating or trying to communicate what their feelings are. So just default is just go to aggression. I mean, before the podcast, I was talking about my son. He's 3 years old and he's throwing tantrums and stuff like that. He doesn't know how to communicate his feelings and stuff. So he just goes to violence, right? Goes to violent acts and kicks things and whatever. But we as adults, we as leaders, we need to be able to figure out how to be able to communicate our feelings, our emotions, what we want. Because if we just resort to violence, then one of the keys of leadership is communication. Like, you have to be able to communicate well. So if you can't communicate your frustration to your team, how are you meant to communicate the goals, the project, the outcome, the purpose? Like, you need to be good at communication as a leader. You can't just resort to violence. It's not a good view. It's not, it does not a good outlook. And remember, as leaders, people are watching us every moment of the day. They're watching what we post on social media. They're watching how we interact with our kids. They're watching, now, rightly or so, it's like, well, public figures should have a private life. Agreed, right? Like, people should have a private life. But still, in your private life, your family, your friends, the people go to church, everything, they are seeing you interact with people at all moments. And so we are always representing our leadership. And we as leaders need to make sure. Now, we're not perfect and we can fail at times and things like that. Like I was just saying to Dr. Rod before, that there's a moment that I kind of failed as a parent, because I didn't handle a situation properly. We don't always. But remember that we are on view. We're on stage. We're on show as leaders. Everyone's watching us. Even if you're not on social media, even if you're just leader of an organization, people, your team are watching how you interact with clients, how you handle an issue with a supplier or an issue with an employee. They're watching every interaction. Now, they may not be just staring at you, but they pick up on it, they observe. And so we need to make sure that every one of our actions is something that does still represent who we are and that is consistent with what we want to achieve and what we want to project. And so as leaders, just remember, communicate properly. Don't resort to violence because it's not a good example. Don't resort to threats. That's not good communication as a leader. I did kind of want to talk about Bernie just for a second, Dr. Rod.
Sure.
because it was actually quite interesting because I don't know, like if you don't really follow politics, you've only seen Bernie as this, guy who flies in coach. He thinks everyone should be not make money and all that. He's just, you kind of painted as that kind of guy, right? And he was leading this hearing, and it was quite interesting that Senator Mark Wayne Mullen just stood up and tried to challenge the other senator, the president of the union, and Bernie just straight away just went, "Sit down, don't be ridiculous. You're senators." Like pretty much just said, "Grow up, like represent who. Just remember what you're representing." And I thought that was a quite. Because he was stern about it, but he didn't get emotional. He didn't insult anyone. He didn't, he just said, "Hey, remember who you are, you're senators," right? What is your take on his response in this situation?
Well, I think he was taken by surprise, but under the circumstances, I actually think he did quite well. And, he called them to order. He refused to allow the president of the Teamsters union to speak out of turn, and he enforced the regulations of Senate committee hearings, and I thought he actually did quite well.
Yeah.
But he was taken by surprise, and so I think he did the right thing, and he did manage to maintain order. Mm-hmm. And of course, in that context, he was the leader because he was chairing the Senate committee hearing.
Yeah.
And he managed to de-escalate the situation, I should say, quite successfully.
Yeah.
And I wonder what he might have done if he was half his age. He might have taken them both outside. I don't know. But look, I think he did.
So what you're saying is we always need a little old man in the room. That's what you're saying?
I don't know about that. Well, you need a wise old man in the room, that's for sure.
That's great. Okay, well, let's shift from an aggressive moment because we're talking about leaders managing conflict, and so let's shift our focus to another situation where there was actually some quite aggression and some conflict happening. Now, yes, we're going to talk about DDE again. Now, if you don't know about DDE, they're daily derivative exotics. They're auto YouTubers, so they're car YouTubers. They rebuild cars and they drive exotic cars and everything like that. So they have recently been on a rally driving from Florida to Las Vegas, ending in Las Vegas for the F1. And we're going to be talking about F1 a little bit later as well. Now, I've been following this because I follow these guys. I enjoy it. It's a bit of escapism for me. Like when I'm just sitting down to eat lunch or whatever, if I'm not watching a podcast or whatever, I'll watch one of their videos. And they've been doing this rally, and I've seen them do a lot of rallies and a lot of really, really high class rallies. And it's really interesting that like every day they did a good job in their vlogs of not talking about the bad stuff that was happening on the rally. They were just being themselves, enjoying the rally, enjoying their cars and being fun. But you could kind of tell with the organization of the place, of the events that they went to and everything like that on this rally, that I'm like, this actually looks really dodgy and looks like a really bad organization. Well, they posted to their Instagram. They didn't do it to their YouTube channel, but they just posted this live video and that's it. They didn't say anything. They just kind of posted this and everything like that. So this was towards the end of the rally, I think it was, where the organizer of the rally was addressing everyone in the rally. Now, I'm not gonna play the audio or anything like that. We'll just and so you can. This is Damon from DDE, filming the situation that was going on, and the guy was addressing. Let me just skim through to actually see him. Like, he's just. I'll give you the breakdown of what he's saying. He's out of screen most because they were not trying to hide necessarily, but they just kind of didn't want it obvious that phone was in the face. And because everyone was complaining about the organization of the rally and the quality of the places they were saying and everything like that. And this guy was getting, don't know whether you can see that. He's just pretty much dressing them down. Oh yeah, that's a good. I won't bother turning on the captions, but thank you, Yash. Anyway, he's just sitting, waving his arms around, pretty much like talking to these people like they're all kids, right? And then gets to this situation where he's addressing one of the members here, and you can see this that she's a female, one of the attendees of the rally, and he starts berating her and starts yelling and screaming in her face. And you can see that she just put her hand up. Just calm down. She's trying to de-escalate the situation. And he's just this whole time just going, it's my rally. I set the rules. It's my way. I'm not listening to you. And they're like, but we're your customers. You're like, no, you paid me for an experience. I'm giving you my experience. I don't care what you say. If you don't like it, you can leave and lose all your money, and you won't get into the F1, which was their end goal to get to, and all this. And so you can see that she's just kind of just sitting back. She just cross her arms to kind of show a little bit of strength or whatever there. But he's just going on by like, well, I'm this and I'm that, and I've done this and I've done that, and it was all ego. And then this woman's husband steps up and just goes, hey, don't get into my wife's face like that. And then they start, he gets up and defends his wife, which I think is kind of fair. It didn't go anywhere, but this was a conflict that was not handled right by the leader. This guy is the organizer of the event, should be the leader, should be listening to his customers, but all he's doing is berating them, going on his ego of how good he is and what he does and everything like that, and just not listening at all. We spoke about communication before. This is really, really, really poor communication, because communication is two ways. So, Dr. Rod, you obviously watched this video. What was your take on this situation?
Well, I think you're right that it wasn't really communication at all, because it was basically one-way information, and that was full of the F-bomb, which I don't think really helps diffuse any kind of tension at all. And but the thought that ran through my mind was, I doubt these people have got a very clearly specified contract.
Yeah.
So they've thought they purchased a certain experience, and it hasn't turned out to be quite as they expected. And the tension arises, I think, when there's a mismatch of expectations, because this rally, what they're purchasing is actually what we economists call an experiential good. It's not like buying toothpaste or a jar of peanut butter or anything like that. You don't really quite know what you're getting until you're in the middle of the experience. And so there's always a degree of uncertainty. And for the entrepreneur, the great risk is a mismatch. Let me try that one again.
You can say it, Dr. Rod.
A mismatch in expectations. And I think that might be what was going on here. But you're quite right, it wasn't very well handled at all. I don't think Damien recognised that the source of the problem is likely to have been that expectations weren't being met, and he didn't have the wisdom in that moment to say, well, let's talk about it and let's see that if we can work out what the issues are and whether or not there's something that we can do about it.
Yeah. Now, actually, let's talk about that because there's that the definition of disappointment is the difference between reality and expectations, right? That's where disappointment happens, right? And I'm guilty of that. I'm the sort of person that does set very high expectations and do tend to get disappointed quite often. Over my years, I've learned to be able to manage that expectation. I still hope for the high expectations, but make sure I manage the real expectations of like, well, this is what's really going to happen. But I admit I get disappointed sometimes. So there's actually a lot to unpack in this one. I think, first of all, let's talk about business leadership. Like, let's talk about business leaders. You have some dissatisfied customers. Now, he's saying it's all the fault of the customers because they sign up to it or whatever. There's a couple of things here. First of all, we talk about expectations. Now, I'm distracted, I know, and I'm sorry for anyone watching. I'm distracted by my finger too. Maybe I'll just point with this. But even I'm distracted by this thing, so I'm sorry if my finger distracts you. The first thing is, he seemed like, I've seen other videos of him throughout the rally, and he seems like what we'd kind of say he's a hype man, right? He's the type of person that just over talks everything, and that's just the type of person he is. Everything's exciting, everything's amazing, everything's the best ever, and you could even tell it in this video when he's kind of talking about, I've done this and I've done that, and all the things he's talking about is actually not all that impressive, but he's talking about it like it's really impressive. He kind of alludes to the fact that being with him is like being with the Queen Elizabeth II. So he obviously is one of these people that's just a hype man. And that's one big challenge we have as business leaders in the promotion of our products and services. Because we do have to talk up our products and services. We have to really promote them and be excited about them. But that's the challenge. It's very easy to over promote and overhype something in that moment if we're not experienced. Because I'm pretty certain this is the first, this particular rally. He says he's done others, but this particular rally is apparently meant to be it seems to be the first one. So I think that he got caught up with like, I can do all these things and I've got all these connections, I've got all this stuff, but he didn't actually deliver on it. So how do we, as business owners, you as the business pastor, I know you pray for businesses rather than giving strategic business advice, and that's fine, but how would you advise a business person that, yes, they need to hype up their, kind of like we need to be proud of what we do as business owners. We need to be proud of it. We need to promote it so that other people are attracted to it. But what's that fine line between being proud of what we do and over-promising?
Look, it is hard to do in the context of what amounts to an experience, because everybody's experience is going to be different.
Yeah.
And their experience is going to be highly conditioned by what they expect.
Yes.
So, look, if you really do kind of over-promise, you have to prepare for the fact that some people are going to be disappointed. And I think you need to be very careful about hyping up an experience, because it will raise people's expectations. And if their expectations are not met, then clearly they're going to be disappointed, and some of them might voice their disappointment quite aggressively. Look, these people paid $9,000, that's $9,000 US for the experience.
Yeah.
If you hype it up,
almost 15,000 Australian.
Roughly, but look, if you hype it up and people are expecting a $90,000 experience, you're gonna have some people who are disappointed.
Yeah.
And I think that's the risk in over-promising. Now, it's especially bad, of course, in a leader if you know that you're over-promising.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the reality of this is, I'll give a couple of the examples. One was they went to a racetrack. Part of one of their stops was at a racetrack, and they were told they can race their cars. They got there, and then the organisers or the management of the actual racetrack said, no, our insurance won't cover you running your own car. We've got like track experience cars that you can race. And they're all like, but we were told we could drive our own cars. Another one was like they rocked up to, they were meant to be able to go to an airstrip to do some drag racing at an airstrip. But what it ended up being is they end up being on a taxi runway that was literally like almost this backyard airport. And it was just the taxi. It was just a bitumen, single lane, probably a couple of 100 meters. Like it wasn't actually all that. Well, it was probably more than, it was probably about, maybe 500 meters long or something like that. It wasn't all that great, but it was that was the example. And also apparently the hotels they were staying in weren't all that great and everything. So, that's the kind of level of overhype. And then the actual delivery that we're talking about. We're not just talking about, they had bad expectations. No, they were told this is what to expect, and they didn't actually get delivered that thing. So I think that he, obviously just type of person that I know this person and they'll let us do this, and just kind of overlook the fine print, right? Like, we can book out a track day, and just assumed that they could just do everything, right? So that's another message. Make sure you check the details. But another part of this that I believe as a business leader he did poorly was listening to his customers. I think one of the biggest challenges as business leaders is we can get a bit ego and think that we know best. And I hear business owners all the time. I've coached thousands of business owners over years. And the amount of times that I've heard a business owner say, customers are stupid. And they treat them like that way, right? Like it's ridiculous how many they actually say that. And so when a customer comes to them with a complaint, their response is they're just stupid. So they don't listen. But the customers are the ones that are paying for things. So we need to listen to our customers. We have to listen to our customers and adjust our products and services to what our customers are saying. Well, actually, there's two different ways you can do this. One, you can, when your customers are complaining, you can do one of two things. One is you can adjust your products and services to meet their expectations. That's a great adjustment. The second option you have is search out new customers that are looking for your particular product or service. If you believe that, no, I truly believe in the type of service or type of product that I offer, but the customers aren't appreciating it. Look, they're not stupid. They're just not your customers. Don't treat them like idiots. Don't disregard them. Don't talk down to them. Don't diminish them. They're just not the right customer for you. They're the right customer for someone else. They're not stupid. They're not bad, right? So you have two options. If your customers are complaining, one is adjust your products or services to meet their expectations, or two, find the right customers that would actually appreciate your things, but don't disrespect the current customers you have. But from a business coach, don't just drop all your customers and go for the other customers, because your business won't have any income in the meantime. So use that time in a moment to just make sure that you can maybe adjust, make a different package for those existing customers while you build up the customer base of your ideal service that you want to offer, and then you can slowly transition across. That's just some business advice. Dr. Ron, were there any other things that you saw? Actually, there was one other thing I wanted to ask you about. Obviously, like I showed you at the end, he got in the face of someone's wife, and that guy got up to defend his wife. Yes? No?
Probably yes.
Yeah.
He wasn't overly aggressive. I think he said, no, hang on a minute. You're not going to treat my wife like that. And I think he probably did the right thing. Look, I find his use of the F word particularly offensive, to be perfectly frank. And look, I think leaders just need to avoid swearing. Just in general. I think it's a good idea. Don't do that.
Yeah.
I did read somewhere that intelligent people swear more than those who are less intelligent, and so that must make me pretty unintelligent.
Yeah.
I just think we need to find a better vocabulary, that's all. But
well, I think on that point is because I remember when Gary V first became really famous, he swore so much, and he just kind of like, it was kind of his brand, and he kind of made all these excuses for it and everything. And then everyone else started swearing and wearing hoodies and sneakers and all that sort of stuff. But I still stand by the fact of like, swearing is lazy. It goes back to that communication thing we were talking about before, is if you're swearing, there's so many other, like for example, and I go back to this example all the time. I grew up listening to rap music. When I became saved, I stopped listening to rap music because the word, like every second word is a swear word, and I'm just like, it just doesn't suit me. And then I came across Christian rap, and I'm like, this is actually more creative. They have a harder job to come up with, because most rappers just use swear words just as filler words, right? They just throw them in to fill in the beat, right? But if you don't use swear words, you have to find the right word to articulate the message and to fit with it. So I think that's in communication as well. Same as what we were talking about before with the violence, is we tend to resort to violence because we don't know the words to say. We tend to resort to swearing because we don't know the words to say. But we as leaders, we have to be good communicators and find the right way to be able to communicate. Find the right way to don't use swear words. I think it diminishes you. If you use swear words as a leader, I feel like it diminishes you. It diminishes your value, diminishes your brand. It just puts out a bad representation of who you are, because you are better than that. You are better than that. We as leaders are meant to be disciplined, right? That's why we're leaders, because we've been more disciplined than others and be able to build things. Yes, we've got gifts and callings as well, but we as leaders need to be more disciplined, and that comes in our language as well. And so not using swear words shows discipline and holds ourselves to a higher standard, and shows people that we hold ourselves to a high standard. If I do that in my communication, I also do that in my work, right? And so that it just represents, it's a physical, I know it's not physical, it's an auditory representation of who we are in our discipline as well. But also, it's just poor communication. If you don't know another word to use and you're using a swear word, well, increase your vocabulary. Increase your vocabulary so you can articulate what you're talking about properly. Now, Dr. Rod, sorry, I kind of cut you off because I thought that was a really good point. You were continuing on about something else about that.
No, the only other thing I was really going to say is it does convey a sense of aggression. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that helps in a situation like this at all. You don't want to come across as being aggressive and self-defensive when the issue most likely arises because of a mismatch of expectations.
Well, yeah, and you say like aggression, and people confuse aggression with strength. Well, if I've got to appear strong, I've got to be aggressive. You don't have to be. You don't actually have to. And actually, we mentioned the Beatitudes earlier. I teach this in. Okay, we've gone this far and almost an hour into our podcast. And first plug of our free leadership development program. Check it out, link below. I teach about meekness, right? One of the Beatitudes is blessed are the meek because they inherit the earth. And people think that being meek is being weak. Well, actually, it's not. Being meek, the actual definition of that is being resilient, being able to handle opposition and keep going. That's what strength is. Strength isn't being aggressive, isn't being the one that rips his shirt off and punches someone or what. Like, that's not strength. Strength is being able to stand up in the face of conflict and control your emotions, control your anger, and so and control the situation. And sometimes that means taking an L, right? Like taking a loss. Like sometimes as leaders, we need to just back down from a situation. I mentioned my son earlier. One of the best lessons I learned when I first became a parent was, and everyone has said this before I was a parent, I'm like, no, I don't agree with it. But after a parent, choose your battles. Choose your battles. There's sometimes my son will do something and I'll be like, yeah, I'm choosing my battle this time. And I'm not fighting that fight today. And sometimes that means that's strength, right? right? That I believe that's also strength as well. So yeah, that's a good point, Dr. Rod. Thank you. Anything else you want to share for that one?
No, I think I've said about all I can say on that one.
Well, let's move from DDE driving across the country to F1, and let's talk about F1 Las Vegas GP. So the Las Vegas GP ran on the weekend, and it was this big hype. It's the first ever race in Las Vegas. It was actually most F1 GPs are run by a promoter. There's a couple that are run by F1 themselves. And this was the first one, and F1 invested, I think they said something that by the end of it, it would have been like $500 million into this event. And it was because it was F1, and if you don't know how F1 works, all of the teams share in the prizes kind of thing. So whatever money F1 makes, all the teams share in it in proportion to their standings and everything like that. And so the teams have a vested interest to make sure that this event goes well as well. And obviously there was some sort of internal memoir. No, not a memoir. Memo. I don't feel like that's right. But anyway, I know it's not a memoir. But there was obviously some internal message saying, let's make sure we're all supportive of this event. And everyone was like talking up, all the team principals, everyone was like kind of like cheerleader, except for one person. There was a couple of people that criticized it, but mainly Max Verstappen, the current world number one. He's now 3-time F1 world champion. He's won this season and won ridiculous amount. I'm trying to remember the exact number that I think he's won 9 races this year alone. And he actually won the Drivers' Championship like halfway through the year. That's how many races he won. But he was actually quite publicly critical of this event, that it's just a show and it's all for parties and everything like that, and people don't appreciate the work that we do, and this is a race, and we're professionals, and it's just a show, and it's all for entertainment. So first of all, Dr. Rod, and actually, like to kind of wrap it up, the event had some issues to start off with. There was some criticism on the first night. There was a pothole cover that came off and destroyed one of the people's. Was it Carlos? I think it was Carlos Sainz's car. Destroyed his car, and he was then penalized because he had to replace his engine and all that sort of stuff. Like, it was like there was this big controversy. But after that, and there was some changes in the late night thing and lack of communication. Wow, communication. Maybe today's topic should have been about communication, Dr. Rob. But in the end, it ended up being a really good race. Most changes in leader that we've seen all year of leading the race, and it was obviously Max still won in the end. It's kind of it's still enjoyable, but it's kind of starting to get a little bit boring now. It's like, yeah, of course he's going to win, and it's like, is he going to lose today? But but anyway, we are, well, I say we because I'm grouping Dr. Rod into this, but we on this podcast are Daniel Ricciardo fans. So go Daniel Ricciardo, right? Representing the Aussies, the good old honey badger. First question I've got for you, Dr. Rod, is all the key stakeholders were kind of fanboys of this event, right? And kind of keeping their mouth shut because they kind of wanted to we talk about over promoting and over hyping. They kind of wanted to promote the spectacle and talk it up and everything like that. Should we really be getting everyone on board? And because I've been involved with churches and businesses and everything like that, where the boss kind of and the leader gathers everyone together and we're like, right, this event, everyone's got to be on board. Everyone's got to be so positive about it. This is the best thing ever. You guys have to talk it up, and anyone who's not talking it up kind of gets shoved off or shoved in a corner or whatever. What's your take on that situation?
Look, as you know, I'm not an expert on F1, but it seems to me that this sport, as well as many, many others, is really internally conflicted over the difference between, let's say, the skill of the sport and its entertainment value.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of sports now have built entertainment around what you might call the core activity.
Yep.
And that was certainly the case here in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
The amount of money that they spend on lighting, for example. So I think what's happening is that the organisers try to attract bigger and bigger attendance or bigger and bigger audiences. And in order to do that, they've got to go beyond those who are pure enthusiasts, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Max Verstappen made the comment that it's 99% show.
Yes.
And although that might be an exaggeration, I think there certainly is some truth in that, because it's not just the race that attracts people. So I think we've got a situation where the drivers are obviously very strongly focused on that event, but a lot of the people who attend are focused on an experience.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of tensions can arise, a lot of internal conflicts can arise when that's the case. So the organisers have really got to walk that tightrope, haven't they? Because they've actually got multiple customers. The drivers form a customer group, and then they've got two other customer groups, those who follow the race because they like the cars, they admire the skill of the drivers, and they come to see a contest between cars and their drivers. And then you've got others who come along really because they see it primarily as entertainment.
Yeah.
And so organisers walk a fine line, and there will come a time when tension overflows, as I think it did in this case.
Yeah. And actually, to kind of on that entertainment versus, your sporting event, I've actually been involved in the organisation of a number of motorsport events in Australia. The V8 supercars used to be involved in that, and some MotoGP stuff, and so I've been involved in that side from an events management point of view, and it's just an event. You turn up, and I mean, I don't know if you ever went to the Gold Coast 500, was it Gold Coast?
It used to, was it? Yeah.
I don't know whether do they still have it.
Yeah, they still have it.
Great.
I don't go.
Love that.
I
don't
go.
Love that event. But like most people go not for the cars. When the cars are going, most people move away because it's too much noise and it's too loud and stuff like that. But there's stuff happening everywhere that it is just an experience. Now, on top of that, you've got Liberty Media, who now owns F1. F1, before Liberty Media bought it, was this snub-nosed, like, elitist club of only the few people. Like, it was only the elite that was interested in it, and it was only for the best and everything like that. But they've made a transition over the last 5 years or so now, Liberty Media, because Liberty Media know this is entertainment. Because even before Liberty Media had it, no one was allowed to post any images or video publicly of F1. It was in breach of their copyright laws, right? Now, Liberty Media creates a whole bunch of stock footage and royalty-free stock footage and stuff like that, so that everyone now, that's why you see all these YouTube channels using somewhat the same stuff, because they understand, they want everyone to be knowing about. So I think that I think this is that challenge between, is it the sporting prowesses or is it the money? Well, you need the money for the business to advance and for it to continue and everything like that. So you need to continue to grow as a business. How much then do you? I don't feel like they've lost, because normally the question is, well, how much do you give up on your core values to then chase the money? But I actually don't feel like they have, because the racing is better than ever. I feel like the actual sport itself is amazing, and I don't think that the quality of the sport has changed. It's just the spectacle around it has changed, and it's now an everyday man's sport rather than just being an elitist sport. How do we achieve that in business? How do we still chase the money to support our core thing without forgetting our core thing?
Well, I'm the business pastor, not the business coach. Go find an expert to help you. Look, I think it's probably fairly difficult, but I do think it gets back to knowing your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
What is your purpose? And I guess the other thing to keep in mind in the context of this particular event, there were only a few drivers who publicly made negative comments.
Mm-hmm.
They had some, I guess, bad luck.
Yeah.
Because what happened in practice, and obviously there were some pretty disappointed fans, and they were there for the race itself. There's no doubt about that, because they came back for the 2 a.m.
Yes.
Practice session, and then of course they were disappointed because they were turned away.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that's led to a potential or actual class action against the organisers now. But on the whole, I don't think that it was managed all that badly, really. Clearly, there were some technical issues with the road surface, which I think ran the tyres very hot, and there were some safety concerns and so on. Those sorts of problems should be relatively easy to sort out, again, with good communication between the organisers and the drivers. My understanding is that it has been a fairly successful event anyway, and that by and large, drivers, the teams, the car makers, and the fans have been fairly well satisfied.
Yeah. So do you think, because Max Verstappen was the main one that was kind of outspoken about the negative stuff of it, and everyone else was kind of singing its praises, should have Max towed the line and just been an ambassador for it? Or like, at what point do you, as a representative of the sport, of the organization, at what point should you toe the line, so to speak, or speak the truth?
Well, look, I think as a general principle, we should always speak well of our organisation.
Yeah.
Because ultimately we want our organisation to thrive. I think the only exception to that would be when there's a genuine reason for whistleblowing.
Yeah.
Which I think is a complex area, and perhaps it's something we can talk about in depth in another podcast. In this case, generally speaking, I don't think it was safety considerations that were driving Max Verstappen. I think probably he was, he didn't really enjoy standing up there and for photo shoots and that kind of thing. As you would expect, he's very strongly focused on the driving. That's one reason why he's a winner.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think probably he should have said a lot less and perhaps focused more of his emotional energy on providing an even better experience for those diehard fans who wanted to see him drive well, which obviously he drove well enough to win. But look, as a general rule, if we don't find it in our hearts to speak well of our organisation, the wise path is to simply keep quiet, except, as I say, when there's a genuine issue about which we should be whistleblowing.
Yeah, that's good. And I don't want to go on a whole nother tangent of this, but you mentioned that Max, he just wants to focus on racing. And I think that's a lot of times, people in business, employees, we can turn around and go, I just want to do my job. But the reason why he gets paid so well is from sponsorship money and fans buying tickets and fans buying merch. And so we have to remember that sometimes not the main part of our job is not always the only thing we should be doing. There are auxiliary things, whatever one of those words, things we need to do, in our business. Maybe it's, we've got to clean up that, maybe we don't, we've got to put the rubbish out. We've got to, clean up something, or do stock take or whatever, those sorts of things. We've got to remember that sometimes we just need to do all of our job, and sometimes there's things and parts of our job that we don't, enjoy, that we still need to do. So let's make a transition. Now, we normally do one leadership lesson from Luke, but today one of our topics actually lent itself to a verse that I wanted to talk about, but also there's a verse for the rest of today's topic. So we're going to do two. Yes, a bonus leadership lessons from Luke. So, but it's about an article. So there was an article that I read in Christianity Today, which was talking about dozens of North Carolina Methodist churches join over 6,000 leaving the denomination. Now, so currently there's a group of 36 United Methodist churches that are in North Carolina that had sued, demanding to sever their ties to the denomination. They have agreed to leave using a plan approved by the church leaders in 2019, the Western North Carolina Conference announced. So pretty much what happened is the United Methodist Churches, UMC, not UPC, that's a completely different denomination. We've actually spoken about UMC before and other churches leaving it. We spoke about this, I think probably almost 12 months ago that we spoke about it. There's a lot of churches leaving this denomination because then the UMC are kind of, accepting homosexual pastors, ordained ministers, and doing accepting weddings for homosexual partners and stuff like that. So there's a lot of people that are just leaving to say, like, we don't agree with these things, so we want to leave. But they weren't allowed to leave, and so because they weren't allowed to leave, they tried to sue. Should we as churches be suing each other, Dr. Rod? Is it unchristian to sue?
Not always, I would have to say. And I know we're entreated in the New Testament not to be taking legal action against one another, and I think as best as we possibly can, we should keep our disputes out of the court. And I think resorting to court action should be something way down our list. In an issue like this, where it's an issue of serious doctrinal dispute, and where it appears as if the denomination did not follow an earlier agreement in terms of congregations withdrawing, it may be that the only avenue open was to take some kind of legal action in order to protect the rights that had been agreed to earlier on, and may also have been necessary in order to protect property. So I think one has to be very prayerful over this issue. I know in my own case, where I've been involved on a board of a Christian organisation, where we were either involved in legal action or actually initiated it. In some cases, under conditions of insurance, it's really the only way that you can operate. And in many cases, of course, your insurance company take over everything.
Okay.
And so, look, I just think we have to apply with great wisdom that biblical injunction not to take legal action against one another, not to sue one another. I certainly don't think it should be a first resort. And look, I know that I'm treading on very thin ice here and that there'll be people who don't agree with me. All I can say is I think there are some circumstances where the whole environment, the whole legal environment, particularly as it revolves around insurance, actually does lead you to legal action. And I would have to say that I don't think legal action is always wrong or sinful, particularly when you are protecting assets that you've built up on behalf of the body of Christ.
So
Now, I don't know whether that's what's involved here, but that may be one of the reasons.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of jump on that property part because reading through this article, they were talking about the who owns the property and all that sort of stuff and everything. So, and also, I'll leave that to side. Maybe we'll get to that in a moment. But in this moment, if it wasn't about the property, I'd assume that like if someone's going, we don't agree on things, let's part ways, which I've done that with business partners in the past. Like, I don't agree with the way you're operating a business anymore. I'm just going to part ways. Now, I didn't take anything. I didn't I just left, right? Like, it was like, this is not for me. So I left. I left, value in the business. I left, whatever it was that I'd left is like, whatever, I've left it. It's fine. The challenge, that seems like it'd be normal and you're wondering why are they suing, but do you know much about the situation that maybe it is more about the property that they're trying to take rather than it just being them just trying to leave the denomination?
Look, I'm not sure because I haven't read the agreement which has led to the dispute. It's really very difficult at the organisational level when there are disputes and the leadership can read things one way and other people can read things a different way. Mm-hmm. And as outsiders, as more or less casual observers, it's really difficult for us to get to the bottom of exactly what is driving this dispute. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to be particularly careful as leaders when it's not our assets that are at risk. Yeah. And look, I do know of whole congregations that have left denominations for similar reasons here in Australia. I know of one case where a congregation had forked out multiple billions of dollars in order to buy some land. Mm-hmm. And when an irreconcilable doctrinal difference emerged, they decided to withdraw from their denomination and they lost all the money that they had put into the property and had to start again. And they're now a thriving congregation in the same community. They're doing good in their community, and they have succeeded as a more or less independent congregation. Mm. So judgment needs to be applied. I think we have to be prayerful about it. There will be some contexts, I believe, in which the result of prayerful consideration is that we simply withdraw with as much grace as we possibly can, knowing that we are going to lose all of our assets and we're going to start from ground zero.
Yeah, so about that though, like, because I know that I kind of, I'm going to say it in a crass way that it's not true, but like, I've been screwed over a lot of times in the past, right? But I'm not saying that bitterly, but I'm trying to think of another way of like, there's been times that things haven't worked out and I've just had to leave with nothing and just walk away. And so you're sharing that example is like, but should we have to just keep being the doormat and keep being screwed over by people? Or is there a place for us to be able to stand up and fight and go, well, actually, our congregation actually contributed to that. Let us give you a portion of the value or whatever. Like, isn't there a place to at least fight for that?
That's why I use the term prayerful consideration, because I don't think every context is the same. And I think under some situations, the right thing to do is, as it were, to stand and fight. Yep. In other situations, the right thing to do is to simply withdraw with as much grace as you possibly can. Look, the handbook isn't the Bible is not a handbook on legal procedures. Yeah. And there are certainly principles that we can draw. We don't want to undermine brotherly love and affection. Mm-hmm. Remember that the metaphor of the church as family, as siblings, is used over 160 times in the New Testament. So
And
our
siblings
relationship,
fight.
well, they do sometimes, but our relationship as brothers and sisters is paramount. And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind. On the other hand, I think the injunction not to take legal action against one another is about individuals. And I don't think the Bible gives us absolute clarity on what we should do as leaders of a congregation or denomination where significant property is at stake. That's why my advice would be you need to go into a period of prayer and actually get the Lord's direction in a particular case.
Well, you mentioned the Bible, and this is meant to be a leadership lessons from Luke. I'm going to read through the passage that does kind of refer to this and kind of sum up this segment. It's from Luke 12, 54. He said to the crowd, he being Jesus, when you see a cloud rising in the west, immediately you say it's going to rain, and it does. And when the south wind blows, you say it's going to be hot, and it is. Hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the skies. How is it that you don't know how to interpret the times, interpret this present time? Why don't you judge for yourselves what is right, as you are going with your adversary to the magistrate or to court? Try hard to be reconciled to him on the way, or he may drag you off to the judge, and the judge turn you over to the officer, and the officer throw you in prison. I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. And kind of what I get from this is obviously like let's try to avoid legal proceedings, because I know from my experience, I try to fight something and I spent over $30,000 in legal fees and got nowhere with it, right? Got nothing, and had 6 to 12 months of just anxiety and pressure and everything like that, and then lost a lot of money as well. So what Jesus is saying is just settle your disputes early. Don't get the courts involved, otherwise you'll cop the hardest thing. I've recently gone through some legal challenges as well, and there was an option for me to take it to court. I'm like, no, just settle it. Look, one thing that I get it from here is settle it early. And also see the signs, right? That's I know Jesus was talking about the signs of the coming and or like of him and all that sort of stuff. Like, but I kind of interpret that as like, see the signs early, right? Like, if you see, don't wait until the dispute happens. Prepare for it, right? Like, so for example, with the denominations or whatever, maybe there were some signs that they ignored early that maybe they could have started making other arrangements or whatever, but see the signs early and settle the dispute early. This recent legal thing, it could have been, I just wanted to get it over quick, because I saw the longer it was dragging on, the more emotional everyone was getting, the more then things kept changing, and then it got nasty, and you just don't want to do that. Just get it done early, get it over with quick, and once it's over with, then everyone can move on with their lives, right? Dr. Rob, what have you got to add to that?
Oh, it's good advice, and look, if you go to a lawyer today, they'll tell you the best thing to do is to settle out of court. Don't get into a situation where you actually have to take something to court, primarily because it's very, very expensive. Yeah. I've been involved in a dispute as a director, and we were advised that if it went into the court system, it would probably cost our organisation $100,000 a day.
What? $100,000 a day?
Correct. Yeah.
Wow.
So look, and we settled out of court, of course, and that's what you want to try to do as much as possible. And look, honestly, when you see things reported in the media about the outcomes of court cases and so on, it's really the tip of the iceberg. Most disputes are actually resolved before they actually get into a courtroom. And sometimes a judge will say, "Don't be silly, get out of here, have another go at reconciling, or have another go at sorting yourselves out."
Yeah.
And I think that advice there is right. You need to be a bit careful, because you might wind up in jail not having had that intention or that expectation in the first place. So, as much as possible, sit down, brother to brother, sister to sister, and work out your differences, and where some kind of compensation is sensible, work it out. And better to do that than to have to spend a lot of money on bringing experts in.
And also, just like that, settle it early, settle it quick. Because I actually saw through my recent thing is at the start, everything was reasonably amicable and everything was we agreed on everything. And the longer it dragged on, the more complicated things get because more emotions get into it. And at the start, you're able to be rational and we're both getting emotional. We it just got harder and harder along the way. And so that's why I was just trying to at the end, I was just pretty much just saying yes to everything, just to get it done. Whatever, let's just get this done, get the dispute done. Like you're saying, those people walked away from their property because they probably just said, we don't want the fight. It's not worth. It's going to distract us from our purpose. Let's just move on as a congregation. So settle early. Now I know that we need to. Let's do the second leadership lesson from Luke, and let's do it quickly. So our real leadership lesson from Luke today, I was disputing to see whether we would finish early or go on. Actually, Dr. Rod, would you like to finish early, or would you like
No, we're good to go. We've got another 10 minutes or so.
Great.
I've just got to go off to another meeting. You know me, I'm always at meetings.
Dr. Rod is on so many different boards, but he's always going to another board meeting. Look, 9:46. So, here we go. So, we're talking today about conflicting leaders, like leaders having a fight. So, how do we best handle conflict or manage conflict as a leader? And I think Jesus has a good example here. Okay, so Luke 9, verse 46. An argument started out among the disciples as to which of them would be the greatest. Jesus, knowing their thoughts, took a little child and had him stand beside him. Then he said to them, "Whoever welcomes this little child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. For he who is the least among you, he is the greatest." "Master," said John, "we saw a man driving out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he is not one of us." "Do not stop him," Jesus said, "for whoever is not against you is for you." So there's a couple of things I see in here is obviously Jesus kind of talking who's the least will be the greatest, like who can handle, and I kind of go back to that meekness, statement before is don't try to be the winner, so to speak, with all these things. Sometimes bowing out, losing your property as we're talking about, sometimes losing a little bit of extra money or whatever. Sometimes being the bigger person, so to speak, which is actually being the loser in the situation by the world's standards, is actually you being the winner, is you being the greatest. And then the other one is they were trying to stop someone who wasn't part of their crew, right? Like he's not one of us. Why is he doing that? We can stop him. Once again, going back to what we said, choose your battles. Choose your battles. Don't that guy's not against you, so just let him be. Sometimes you might get into a confrontation with someone. Just think about, what are they actually fighting? What are they actually fighting? There's sometimes I've been in confrontations before with someone and realized they're just angry at themselves, or they're just disappointed at something else, or they're just taking out their aggression on me. I'm not actually the one. They're not against me, right? So maybe they're not exactly for me, but it's good to take that thought. Your thoughts on the verse, Dr. Rod?
Well, I'm wondering whether there are two lessons in here actually, and the question about who is the greatest, I think, reflects the culture of the time where honour and hierarchy of honour was a really important thing in their society, and that there was often a lot of rivalry among individuals in terms of who had the greatest honour. And of course, honour was such an important thing, and it isn't all that long ago that we would have duels even in our own culture over issues of honour. But I think Jesus was saying, hang on a minute, the kingdom of God doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And you've got to be like a child. And the thing about children in the Jesus' day was they didn't have honour, they didn't have power.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying, you've got to be like these. You've got to be like these. Put aside the issue of honour, put aside the issue of power, and come to the Father like a little child.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the second one, again, in that culture, and I think we can relate to it today, you are either on one side or the other. You're on Team A or Team B, and there are no other options. And I think the disciples would have understood what Jesus was alluding to here. The guy who was casting out demons in the name of Jesus was on the A team.
Mm-hmm.
And we know he was on the A team because he wasn't on the B team.
Yes.
And I think we can relate to that today with the way cancel culture goes and so on. You're on one team or the other, and there are no other options. And so the team we're on, of course, is the team that doesn't chase after honour or after power, but really chases after a relationship with God through his Son, Jesus Christ. And that, of course, brings us all down to exactly the same level.
Yes. Yeah, actually, I was on this topic of suing people and everything like that. There's an Australian comedian now, Isaac Butterfield. Now, I don't actually recommend his comedy. He's quite crass and actually quite anti just kind of everything. But I saw this thing of he was being sued by someone because of an offensive joke that he had and everything like that. And he was, I've now lost my point for a moment. I've lost my point. I got distracted by giving.
He's being sued for a joke, he said.
Yeah, he's being sued for a joke. No, I forget. Whatever we were talking about before. There you go. That thing's happened. That's live TV for you folks.
Come back next week. You'll remember by then.
Come back next week. We'll I just don't even remember what we were talking about before. Oh no, that's right. He was being sued by an Aboriginal body because they were like, you're having a go at people less than you. And he's like, well, actually, no, you're being racist because you're the one that's thinking that Aborigines are less than me. He goes, no, all people are equal. I don't care. He goes, I don't punch down. The saying is, don't punch down. I don't punch down. I just punch everywhere, right? Like he goes, I insult everyone. Like, but I don't think that I'm better than anyone, and I don't think that there are different levels of people. He goes, everyone's equal. So at least he has that as a good value. But I think that's the thing. Like we tend to forget that there aren't levels in this thing. We're all on the same level. We are all brothers and sisters in Christ, and we're all children of God, and we're all created by God, and can all be wiped out in a moment by God removing our breath. Like we are all. Yeah. There's no hierarchy, and there is no more important purpose than your purpose, right? Let me say that again. There is no more important purpose than your purpose. Now, Dr. Rod's purpose is not more important than my purpose, but my purpose is not more important than Dr. Rod's purpose. My purpose is more important to me. It's more important that I do my purpose than it is that I do Dr. Rod's purpose, right? So one thing that's really important is we're all equal, right? Just because some people's callings or their purpose happens to be paid more or have more celebrity or have more, fame attached to it or whatever, it doesn't make their purpose more important than your purpose. We're all equal. We've just got different callings. And the most important purpose is your purpose, is figuring out what your purpose is and following your purpose, not following someone else's, not chasing someone else's, and not thinking that because your purpose has more notoriety or has more fame or has more money or has more influence or whatever, that doesn't make your purpose more important, doesn't make you more important than anyone else. We are all equal, but we've all been given different callings. And so we should all respect everyone and understand that everyone is equal. I think that's a good point to end it on, Dr. Rod.
Certainly is.
So, hey, thanks for watching this. And I know there's been a few pauses in this one. I've actually really enjoyed this podcast. That was a great podcast. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, give us a thumbs up. If there's been some of the stuff that's been helpful, put a comment below and give us an encouraging comment. It helps. And if you'd like to see more of this content, hey, we'd be honored if you would consider subscribing. But thank you for watching right till the end. Dr. Rod, thank you once again for always contributing amazingly to our conversations. And have a great week. And I will see you and you next week. Bless you all and have a spectacular week.